In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost.
Amen.
We commemorate this evening two brothers in blood and in faith, who are often described as the apostles to the Slavic peoples. To understand why, and by way of biography, let us begin in Constantinople in the year 862. The great schism between Eastern and Western Christendom has not yet taken place, and so the Latin and Greek churches are still in communion with one another. The Byzantine Emperor Michael III received a request from Prince Ratislav of the Slavic kingdom of Moravia, roughly modern-day Czech Republic, Hungary, and Slovakia. Since our people rejected paganism, he wrote, they have embraced the Christian law, but we do not have a teacher who can explain the true faith to us in our own language. Now, Cyril and his brother Methodius were Greek, but they had grown up in a Slavonic-speaking area, and their knowledge of the language, combined with noted theological acumen and missionary enthusiasm, made them the ideal choice for the mission. Both were priests, Methodius a monk, and custodian of the great archive attached to the Church of Hagia Sophia at Constantinople. Cyril had already been a missionary to what is now Crimea, and in the 850s, Cyril had also been called on to engage in dialogue with Muslim theologians from the Abbasid Caliphate on the nature of the Holy Trinity. Immediately they set about translating the scriptures into Slavonic, using the new Glagolitic alphabet. It is no coincidence that today the alphabet many Slavonic languages are written in is called Cyrillic. Their efforts in Moravia began well. The word of the Lord did indeed spread throughout the region, in the words of our first reading. But the brothers soon find themselves in conflict with the Frankish Western clergy, who felt that these Greeks were trespassing on their patch. This turf war would, in due course, lead to Methodius' imprisonment. The truth is that thousands of peoples of Slavic descent had settled in these areas in between the western and eastern parts of the empire, relations between which were often tense. So Cyril and Methodius travelled to Rome to seek the support of the Pope, which they duly obtained. Perhaps Pope Adrian II saw that these peoples could form a bridge between West and East, preserving the unity of the two halves of the Church. While in Rome, Cyril died and was buried in the Basilica of San Clemente. Meanwhile, Methodius continued his mission in Moravia alone, was consecrated bishop shortly afterwards, and continued to spread the gospel by promoting translations of liturgical as well as scriptural texts into the language of the Slavonic-speaking peoples. These brothers are examples to us not only of missionary zeal, but, I suggest, of missionary sensitivity and wisdom. First, as we have heard, they experienced political intrigue and significant oppression and had to navigate that with integrity and courage. Second, they prepared carefully to enter into the life and language of the people they had been invited to preach to, and in so doing speak to us of the two lungs of the Church, East and West, breathing together to advance the work of the gospel, in the words of St. John Paul II. So it is that these two brothers are venerated by the Eastern churches as equal to the apostles, and in the West as co-patron saints of Europe. Now, Cyril and Methodius, in their missionary work, had great concern not only for the unity of Christians, but also for their diversity. Their lives have much to teach us about how we Christians relate to one another, both within and between our various traditions. What Cyril and Methodius brought to Moravia was not a bland, one-size-fits-all version of the Christian faith, but one which responded generously and sensitively to an invitation and sought to express itself in the language and idiom of those who invited them. Over this last century, Christians of different traditions have begun to realise that the Christian faith is never something we own, or at least that if it is a possession, it's one to be shared. Perhaps in ecumenism, we've begun to realise that the riches of our different traditions are not things we need to leave behind or be embarrassed about in a search for the lowest common denominator between Christians. Rather, we come to realise that those riches and our heritage are things to be shared. Because if indeed they are gifts of God, then they're there to be shared. God's gifts always demand that. They can never be held on to jealously. Cyril and Methodius shared the riches of the Christian faith generously. They were confident enough to allow their expression of it to be shaped and moulded by those they encountered. And these Eastern priests were humble enough to seek the support of the Pope as Patriarch of the West for their missionary work. After the great schism between East and West, and even in recent years, our different Christian denominations have often acted as if they didn't owe each other anything or have anything to learn from each other. Mercifully, things have changed, although there is always more to be done. But that change has required a mysterious mixture of confidence and humility. Confidence that God has given each of our churches great riches, but humility as we realise that all the riches of our traditions are but a drop in the ocean of truth, which is in Jesus Christ. And so Cyril and Methodius encourage us to turn to one another and say, tell us what you know. What is your experience of the Christian faith? Do we as Christians approach one another with that excitement, saying first and foremost, what can you tell me about Jesus? Two of the ways we grow closer as Christians are recognising our thirst to know more about God and in sharing what we do know generously and sensitively. This evening, saints, show us that Christian unity depends on both of these things and on awareness of the nature of God's gifts, which demand to be shared. In the name of the Father,